The morning my husband was buried, I thought the worst part of my life was already behind me. I was wrong. It was a Thursday, March 6th, 2025, and I was standing in the lobby of Grace Harbor Church on Rainier Avenue South in Seattle, Washington, watching people file out after the service. My husband, Nathan, was gone. He was 36 years old. The doctors said it was liver failure, acute and sudden, in a man who barely drank. They called it idiopathic. They called it tragic. They called it rare. I called it impossible. I was 31, a middle school English teacher at Garfield Middle in the Central District. Nathan and I had been married for 4 years. We'd bought a little craftsman house on Beacon Hill 2 years ago, painted the front door blue, planted tomatoes in the backyard, and talked about having kids. Now those tomato cages were rusted, and the blue door needed repainting, and Nathan was in a box at the front of a church while 100 people whispered about what a shame it was. I stood near the back, in a black dress my mother had picked out, because I couldn't bring myself to go shopping. My hands were clasped in front of me, and I was trying very hard not to fall apart. People kept touching my arm and saying things like, "He's in a better place," and "If there's anything I can do," and I nodded and thanked them and felt absolutely nothing. My parents were there. My father, Gene, was 64, a retired plumber with thick hands and a quiet voice. He sat in the third pew and stared straight ahead the entire service like he was trying to hold himself together by not moving. My mother, Diane, 61, who'd spent 30 years as a school cafeteria worker before retiring, was beside him, dabbing her eyes with a folded tissue. They'd loved Nathan like a son. Maybe more than a son, because their actual son, my older brother Mitchell, had always been a source of worry. Mitchell was 38. He ran a construction company in Tacoma, or at least he said he did. The truth was more complicated. Mitchell had always been the golden child growing up, the football star, the charming one, the one who could talk his way out of anything. But somewhere along the way, charm turned into manipulation, and confidence turned into recklessness. He'd borrowed money from our parents twice in the last 3 years, once for $40,000 and once for $25,000, both times swearing it was the last time, both times promising to pay it back. He never did. He was at the funeral with his wife, Danielle. She was 35, a dental hygienist with sharp cheekbones and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. They sat in the front row, which bothered me, though I couldn't say why. Mitchell had his arm around Danielle, and twice during the service, I caught him checking his phone under his jacket. When the service ended and people started moving toward the parking lot, I stepped outside for air. The sky was gray, the way Seattle always is in March, and the air smelled like wet pavement and cedar. I leaned against the brick wall of the church and closed my eyes. That's when I heard footsteps. Quick, deliberate. I opened my eyes. It was Leah Costas. She was 27, small and dark-haired, with wire-rimmed glasses and an anxious energy that made her seem like she was always about to say something important. She'd been Nathan's research assistant at Helios Biotech, the pharmaceutical startup where he'd worked as a lead biochemist for the past 3 years. I'd met her a handful of times at company events. Nathan had always spoken highly of her, said she was the most competent person in the lab. She glanced over her shoulder, then stepped close to me. Too close. Her hand found mine, and I felt something press into my palm, something small, hard, rectangular. "Don't look at it now," she whispered. Her voice was shaking. "Go home. Plug it into your laptop. There's a folder called For Megan. That's you. Nathan told me your middle name." I stared at her. "What is this?" "It's a flash drive. Nathan gave it to me 2 weeks before he died. He made me promise." Her eyes were filling with tears. "He said if anything happened to him, I had to get it to you. Only you, not your brother, not anyone else in your family." My stomach dropped. Why not my brother? Leah looked at me for a long moment. Then she squeezed my hand and stepped back. "Just watch the videos. You'll understand." She turned and walked quickly across the parking lot, got into a gray Honda Civic, and drove away. I stood there with the flash drive pressed against my palm, my heart hammering. Behind me, I could hear my mother calling my name. I slipped the drive into my coat pocket and went back inside. I didn't look at it until that night. My parents had come back to the house on Beacon Hill with me. My mother made soup. My father fixed the leaky faucet under the kitchen sink because that was how he coped, by finding something to do with his hands. They stayed until 9, and then my mother kissed my forehead and told me to try to sleep, and they drove back to their apartment in Tukwila. The moment their taillights disappeared down the street, I locked the front door, pulled out my laptop, and plugged in the flash drive. There were 6 files. 4 were documents: a PDF of Nathan's lab notebooks, a bank statement, a scanned insurance policy, and a handwritten letter. The 5th was a spreadsheet. The 6th was a video file, time-stamped February 18th, 2 weeks before Nathan died. I opened the video first. Nathan's face filled the screen. He was sitting at his desk in our spare bedroom, the one we'd turned into a home office. The lamp behind him cast a warm yellow glow. He looked thin, thinner than I'd realized. His cheeks were hollow, and his eyes were ringed with dark circles, but his voice was steady. "Hey, Meg," he said, using the name only he called me. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was scared, and I thought I could fix it myself, and I was wrong." He paused and rubbed his face. "Something is happening to me. I've been getting sicker for months. It started with nausea, then fatigue, then my hands started shaking. I went to Dr. Alderman in October. He ran blood work. My liver enzymes were through the roof. He couldn't explain it. Neither could I." Nathan leaned closer to the camera. "So I ran my own tests. In the lab at Helios, I used the mass spectrometer after hours. Meg, I found ethylene glycol metabolites in my blood. Someone has been poisoning me." I stopped breathing. Ethylene glycol, antifreeze. I knew what it was because Nathan had explained it to me once, years ago, when we'd been watching some true crime documentary. He'd said it was the perfect poison because it was sweet, odorless, and by the time symptoms showed up, the damage was already done. Nathan continued. "I didn't want to believe it, but I tested myself 3 more times over 6 weeks. The levels kept rising. Someone is putting it in something I consume regularly. I've narrowed it down. Every Sunday, Mitchell and Danielle have us over for dinner. Danielle always makes me a special cocktail, this ginger bourbon thing. She says it's her grandmother's recipe. She makes it in the kitchen and brings it out already mixed. Nobody else drinks it. Meg, the levels spike every Monday morning after those dinners. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the laptop. I paused the video and stood up. I walked to the kitchen sink and splashed cold water on my face. Then I went back and pressed play. "I know what you're thinking," Nathan said. "Why didn't I stop going to the dinners? Why didn't I go to the police? Because I needed proof. If I accused Mitchell without evidence, he'd lawyer up and disappear. You know how he is. So I kept going. I kept drinking the cocktails. And I kept testing myself." His voice cracked. "I know that sounds insane. Maybe it is. But I needed to build a case. For you. Because I don't think I'm going to survive this." He reached off camera and held up a piece of paper. "This is a $750,000 life insurance policy on me. Mitchell took it out 8 months ago through a broker in Tacoma. I'm not supposed to know about it." He forged my signature. "I found out because the broker's assistant, a woman named Christine, accidentally CC'd me on an email meant for Mitchell. I've saved that email. It's on this drive." He set the paper down. "There's also a bank statement showing that Mitchell's company is $380,000 in debt. He's been hiding it. His credit is destroyed. He can't get another loan. That policy is the only way out." Nathan looked directly into the camera. "Meg, my brother-in-law is killing me for money. And I think his wife is helping him. I've put everything on this drive. Lab results, the insurance documents, the email chain, the bank records. I've given a copy to Leah. She's the only person at work I trust. If something happens to me, she'll get it to you." He paused. His eyes were wet. "I love you. I'm sorry I kept this from you. I thought if I told you, you'd make me stop going to the dinners, and we'd lose the evidence. But I should have told you. I should have trusted you. You're the strongest person I know." He reached toward the camera. "Be careful, Meg. Don't confront Mitchell. Go to the police. Go to the FBI. Let them handle it. Promise me." The screen went black. I sat in the dark living room for a long time. I don't know how long. The clock on the wall ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed, its headlights sweeping across the ceiling. I thought about Nathan sitting in this house, getting sicker every week, Going to those Sunday dinners, drinking the cocktails, knowing what was in them, and saying nothing, doing it for me. Gathering evidence so that when he was gone, I'd have what I needed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to Mitchell's house in Tacoma and break down his door. I wanted to wrap my hands around his throat and ask him how he could do this to the kindest man I'd ever known. Instead, I opened the other files. I read every document. I cross-referenced the lab results with the dinner dates. Nathan had been meticulous. Every test was dated, labeled, and annotated in his careful handwriting. The pattern was undeniable. At 2 a.m., I called Leah. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. "You watched it," she said. "Yes." "I'm sorry, Megan. I wanted to tell you at the funeral, but I promised Nathan. He said only give you the drive, nothing else. He said you'd know what to do." "How long have you known?" "Since early February. He came to me at the lab. He was so weak he could barely stand. He told me everything and made me swear. He said he didn't trust anyone else." Her voice broke. "I begged him to go to the hospital. He refused. He said if he checked in, Mitchell would know he was onto him, and he'd destroy the evidence." I closed my eyes. That sounded exactly like Nathan. Stubborn, logical, willing to sacrifice himself for the plan. "Thank you, Leah," I said, "for keeping your promise." "What are you going to do?" Exactly what Nathan told me to. The next morning, Friday, I drove to the FBI field office on 3rd Avenue in downtown Seattle. I told the woman at the front desk I had evidence of a homicide. 20 minutes later, I was in a conference room with Special Agent Rosa Delgado, a woman in her early 50s, with short silver hair and the kind of steady gaze that made you feel like she'd already figured out what you were going to say before you said it. I put the flash drive on the table and told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she picked up the drive and turned it over in her hands. "We'll need to verify all of this," she said. "The lab results, the insurance policy, the bank records. If it checks out, we'll open a formal investigation. But I need you to understand something, Mrs. Holt." "What?" "You cannot tell anyone about this. Not your parents, not your friends, not your brother. If Mitchell finds out we're looking at him, he'll destroy evidence, possibly flee. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Can you act normal around him? If he calls, you answer. If he invites you to dinner, you go. You behave like a grieving widow, nothing more." My stomach turned. I can do it. "One more thing. Nathan's body. We'll need to exhume it for an independent toxicology analysis. That requires a court order, and it takes time, probably 2 to 3 weeks. Do whatever you need to do." Delgado looked at me for a long moment. "Your husband was a very smart man, Mrs. Holt. This evidence package is more thorough than what most investigators put together. He built this case knowing he might not survive to see it through. That took extraordinary courage." I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. The next 10 days were the hardest of my life. I went back to work on Monday because I needed the routine. I stood in front of my 7th graders and taught them about metaphors and similes and the difference between affect and effect. And the whole time I was thinking about ethylene glycol and insurance policies and my brother's face at the funeral, checking his phone. Mitchell called me twice that week. The first time, he asked how I was holding up. I said I was managing. He said he and Danielle wanted to have me over for dinner on Sunday, like old times, just to be together as family. My skin crawled, but I said yes. The second time, he asked if Nathan had left any paperwork behind, any files, any documents. His voice was casual, almost too casual. You know, financial stuff. "I just want to make sure you're not dealing with anything complicated on your own." "I haven't found much," I said. "Just some bank statements and tax returns. Why?" "No reason. Just looking out for my little sister." I hung up and texted Delgado. She replied within minutes. "Good, keep it up. We're making progress." Sunday came. I drove to Mitchell's house in Tacoma, a large craftsman in the North End that I now knew he couldn't afford. Danielle answered the door in an apron, smiling wide. "Megan, I'm so glad you came. I made your favorite. Lemon chicken." The house smelled like roasted garlic and fresh bread. Mitchell was in the living room with a beer, watching basketball. He stood up when I walked in and hugged me, held me a beat too long. "How you doing, kid?" "Day by day," I said. We sat down to dinner. Danielle brought out the food, poured wine for herself and Mitchell, and set a glass of sparkling water in front of me. I noticed she didn't offer me a cocktail. Of course she didn't. There was no reason to make the cocktail anymore. The person it was designed for was dead. I ate the chicken. I complimented the seasoning. I laughed at Mitchell's joke about the Seahawks. I helped Danielle clear the table. And the whole time, I was watching Mitchell's eyes dart to his phone every few minutes, watching Danielle's hands tremble slightly when she poured the wine, watching the way they looked at each other across the table, quick glances loaded with something I couldn't name. After dinner, while Danielle was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher, Mitchell sat down next to me on the couch. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." My pulse spiked. "Did Nathan ever mention anything about a life insurance policy?" I kept my face blank. "He had one through work, I think. Why?" "No, I mean a separate one. A private policy. Not that I know of. Should he have?" Mitchell studied my face. Then he smiled and clapped my shoulder. "No, forget it. I heard something from someone at the funeral, and I wanted to make sure you were taken care of. That's all." "That's sweet of you, Mitchell." He held my gaze for 1 second too long. Then he stood up and went to get another beer. I drove home that night, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. When I got home, I called Delgado and told her everything. "He's nervous," she said. "He's trying to figure out if you know about the policy. That means he's planning to file the claim soon. We need to move faster." 3 days later, the court order came through for the exhumation. I didn't tell my parents. I couldn't. Not yet. The FBI exhumed Nathan's body at 6 a.m. On a Wednesday morning, quietly, with no press. The independent toxicology report came back the following Monday. Ethylene glycol poisoning. Chronic exposure over a period of approximately 4 to 5 months. The levels in Nathan's liver and kidneys were consistent with repeated small doses ingested orally. Nathan was right. About everything. Delgado called me into the field office that afternoon. She sat me down in the same conference room where we'd first met and laid it out. "We have enough for an arrest. The toxicology confirms poisoning. The insurance policy is fraudulent." Nathan's video testimony, combined with the lab records and the financial evidence, gives us a clear motive and a clear suspect. "Suspects," I corrected. Danielle made the cocktails. "We're arresting both of them. Tomorrow morning, simultaneous raids on their home and Mitchell's office. What about their kids?" Delgado nodded. That was the part that gutted me. Mitchell and Danielle had a daughter, Lily, who was 7 years old. She was in 2nd grade. She liked to draw horses, and she called me Auntie Meg, and she had absolutely no idea what her parents had done. "CPS will be on standby," Delgado said. "If there's family willing to take temporary custody, that's the preferred outcome." I called my parents that night. I told them everything. My mother went silent for so long, I thought the call had dropped. My father made a sound I'd never heard before, something between a groan and a sob. When my mother finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Our boy did this?" "Yes, Mom." Another long silence. Then my father's voice, rough and broken. "What about Lily?" "She's going to need us, Dad." "Then we'll be there," he said. "We'll be there." The arrests happened at 6:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. I wasn't there. Delgado told me later. 14 agents, 2 teams, simultaneous entry. Mitchell tried to run out the back door and made it as far as the fence before 2 agents brought him down. Danielle was in the kitchen in her pajamas. She didn't resist. She just said, Lily was asleep upstairs. A female agent woke her gently and stayed with her until my parents arrived an hour later. My mother held Lily on her lap in the back of my father's truck and told her that Mommy and Daddy had to go away for a while, but that Grandma and Grandpa were going to take care of her. Lily asked if she could bring her stuffed horse. My mother said yes, of course, sweetheart. Whatever you need. The trial took 4 months. It was held in the King County Superior Court in downtown Seattle, a building I'd walked past 100 times and never once imagined I'd be inside. The prosecution laid it out, piece by piece. The toxicology report, Nathan's video, the forged insurance policy, the bank records showing Mitchell's company was hemorrhaging money, the email from the broker's assistant, testimony from Dr. Alderman about Nathan's declining health, testimony from Leah about Nathan's confession in the lab. Mitchell's defense attorney argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that Nathan could have been exposed to ethylene glycol accidentally, that the insurance policy didn't prove murder. But when the prosecution played Nathan's video in the courtroom, when Nathan's voice filled the room saying, "My brother-in-law is killing me for money, and I think his wife is helping him," the jury's faces told the whole story. Danielle's attorney tried a different approach. She argued that Danielle had acted under Mitchell's coercion, that she was a victim of his manipulation, that she'd been afraid to refuse. The prosecution countered with text messages between Mitchell and Danielle, planning the doses, discussing the timeline, and calculating when Nathan would be too sick to work, triggering the insurance payout. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts for both defendants. Murder in the first degree for Mitchell. Murder in the second degree and conspiracy for Danielle. At sentencing, the judge, a woman named Judge Patricia Yoon, looked at my brother and spoke in a voice that carried through the silent courtroom. "Mr. Calloway, you exploited the trust of your own family for financial gain. You poisoned an innocent man over the course of months, watching him suffer, watching him deteriorate, while sitting across from him at your own dinner table. The court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole." Mitchell stared straight ahead. He didn't blink. He didn't react. It was the same blank expression he'd worn at Nathan's funeral. Judge Yoon turned to Danielle. "Mrs. Calloway, your participation in this crime was deliberate and sustained. However, the court recognizes evidence of coercive influence by your co-defendant. You are sentenced to 35 years in the Washington State Department of Corrections." Danielle collapsed. Her attorney caught her arm, but she slid out of the chair and onto the floor, sobbing. I sat in the gallery and felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, no closure. Just a vast, hollow emptiness where my brother used to be. Outside the courthouse, the August sun was warm on my face. Leah was waiting on the steps. She'd attended every day of the trial, sitting in the back row, taking notes in a small leather notebook. She looked up when I came out and stood. "It's over," she said. "Yeah." She hesitated. "Are you okay?" I almost laughed. "No, but I will be." My parents came out behind me. My father's face looked like it had aged 10 years and 4 months. My mother held his arm. Behind them, Leah stood awkwardly, hands in her coat pockets. My mother looked at her, then walked over and put both hands on Leah's shoulders. "Thank you," she said, "for keeping your promise to Nathan, for protecting my daughter. You're part of this family now, whether you like it or not." Leah's eyes filled. She opened her mouth and closed it again, then just nodded, tears running down her cheeks. My father put his hand on Leah's back. "You need anything, ever, you call us." "Understood?" Leah whispered, "Understood." That fall, my parents became Lily's legal guardians. It wasn't easy. Lily had nightmares. She'd wake up screaming for her mother. My mom would hold her and rock her and sing the same lullaby she'd sung to me and Mitchell 30 years ago. Slowly, painfully, Lily started to adjust. She started drawing again. The horses got bigger and brighter. She made a friend at her new school in Tukwila. She started calling my parents Nana and Papa. I visit them every Sunday. The 4 of us sit around my parents' kitchen table. My father's cooking is awful, but nobody says so. And we talk about homework and movies and whether the Mariners will ever make the playoffs. We don't talk about Mitchell. Not yet. Maybe someday, but not yet. One afternoon in October, I drove to Sunset Hills Memorial Park in Bellevue, where Nathan is buried. The headstone is simple, polished granite, the way he would have wanted. Nathan James Holt, 1989 to 2025. Beloved husband, friend, and protector. I knelt on the grass and set down a small bouquet of sunflowers. They were his favorite. Not roses, not lilies, sunflowers, because he said they were the only flower that looked happy. "Hey," I said, "it's done. Mitchell got life. Danielle got 35 years. They're not getting out." The wind moved through the trees above me, scattering a few leaves across the grass. "Lily's doing okay. Mom and Dad have her. She's drawing horses again. Big ones with wings. I think you'd like them." I traced his name with my fingertip. "Leah's good too. She got promoted at Helios. Mom keeps trying to set her up with the son of some guy from Dad's bowling league. Leah's too polite to say no, so she just keeps rescheduling." I smiled. And then the smile fell apart, and I cried. Not the controlled, dignified crying I'd done at the funeral. Real crying. The kind that sounds ugly and feels like your chest is being ripped open. "I miss you," I said when I could speak again. "Every single day. I miss your terrible puns and the way you sang in the shower and how you always burned the toast and then ate it anyway because you said it built character." I wiped my face with my sleeve. "I'm mad at you too, you know. For not telling me. For going to those dinners. For drinking those cocktails when you knew. You stubborn, beautiful, stupid man." The wind picked up. Somewhere nearby, a bird sang 3 clear notes. "But I understand why you did it. You wanted to make sure there was enough evidence that they couldn't wiggle out of it. You wanted to protect me. You wanted justice, not revenge. And you got it." I stood and brushed the dirt from my knees. "I'm going to be okay, Nathan. Not today, maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, I'm going to keep teaching. I'm going to keep showing up for Lily and Mom and Dad and Leah. I'm going to live the life you wanted for us, even though you're not here to share it." I kissed my fingers and pressed them to the top of the headstone. "I love you, always." Then I turned and walked back to my car, where the sunlight was breaking through the clouds for the first time in days, the way it sometimes does in Seattle, sudden and bright and almost too beautiful to look at, like a promise you didn't expect to receive. Looking back now, I want to say something to whoever is listening. Family betrayal is the deepest kind of wound because it comes from the people who are supposed to love you the most. When Mitchell chose greed over loyalty, when he watched Nathan suffer at his own dinner table week after week, he didn't just destroy my husband. He shattered something in all of us, something that will never fully heal. But here's what I've learned. Revenge doesn't fix it. I wanted revenge. I wanted to be the one to take Mitchell down, but Nathan was wiser than me. He didn't leave me a weapon. He left me evidence. He pointed me toward the law, not toward violence. And that made all the difference. If you're going through something like this, if someone you trust is hurting you or someone you love, please don't stay silent. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't try to handle it alone. Tell someone. Tell the authorities. Tell anyone who will listen. Nathan waited because he wanted to be thorough, and it cost him his life. I honor his sacrifice, but I wish every day that he'd told me sooner. Thank you for staying with me through this. I'd love to hear what you think. What would you have done in my position? Would you have been able to sit across the table from the person who killed your husband and pretend everything was fine? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and tell me where you're watching from. If this story moved you, please subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And remember, this is a fictional story crafted for dramatic purposes. While the names and locations are invented, the emotions are real. Take care of each other.